Yeah, hopefully.
So I just started recording this because I don't want you or Zoltan to say anything amazing.
Yes, I'm here.
It get wasted.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay.
So the first thing that I have a lot of questions, obviously, but the first thing I would like to ask is Tokaj pronounced Tokaj or Tokaji, or is the place called Tokaj or Tokaj, and is the wine called Tokaj or Tokaji, or how are these words pronounced correctly?
Let's leave this to the native Hungarian.
Yeah, so correct is to say it Tokaj.
Tokaj.
Tokaj is the place of the name of the town actually, and it's the name of the wine region. Tokaji, it's from Tokaj actually.
So
Tokaj, aszú, it's aszú from Tokaj, yes.
But you pronounce it Tokaj.
Tokaj, yes.
Tokaj.
So the A, it's a closed vowel, so you pronounce it O, not A. It's a closed one.
Kind of like EU in Portuguese, I guess. Well, not really. Kind of the opposite of E. Well, anyway, Tokaj and Tokaji.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
so now that's okay. So thank you. We can sign off now.
Well, Hoyt, I've had to go through this learning experience myself, obviously, because you can probably guess I'm not Hungarian. So I have a background in fine wine, and since 2011 I've been involved in Tokaj. And like you, I studied it a lot from books when I was doing my WSET courses. But it's been a real treat to spend the last, 8-9 years over in the region. But the pronunciation, don't get too hung up on it. Hungarian is not the easiest language for an outsider. But it's important to remember that the little I on the end is the wine. It is from Tokaj, and the town does not have the I on it. We spend a lot of time looking at our labels thinking people are going to think we've just misprinted everything, because sometimes the I is there, sometimes it's not. But Tokaj is my outsider's version of the pronunciation.
Well, you also confuse everyone by printing the D's backwards in oddity.
Oh, yes. Anything to get attention for our little dry wine.
So I never realized there was a person named Wilson Daniels. I thought Wilson Daniels was 2 last names, but apparently there is a person named Wilson Daniels, and she just joined us.
It's 2 people. It was Wim Wilson and it was Jack Daniels. And Jack is still with us. Jack's an amazing man. He often gets confused for the whiskey of the same name. I've stood with him in a few restaurants where the staff come out and hold up bottles of Jack Daniels and get Jack to stand with us all, and he's too polite to say anything. But yeah, he really was, and founded an incredible business, which is a real family of like-minded producers. We do things very differently, but I think we share a lot in common with the other wineries.
Well, thank you for changing your name, Kimberly, so I'm not.
Good day, Hoyt. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you. I actually have met Jack Daniels a few times over the years, because I've been doing this a long, almost 50 years. I've been a wine professional for almost 50 years.
Wow. You must drink a lot of Tokaj, because you look quite young for having done this for 50 years.
I haven't drunk as much Tokaj as I should. I'm sorry, Tokaj. I haven't drunk as much Tokaj as I should have, and I'm going to alleviate that problem today. Hi, Allison. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Allison.
So talk to us. I have a lot of questions, but talk to us. Well, first, I would encourage everyone to pour themselves a glass of the oddity, the dry ferment, as we get started. Talk to us about Hungary and what makes Hungary such a different and special place where these wines that are really unlike any wines made I mean, there's really nothing like, especially the second and the third wine today, like these wines anywhere else in the world that I know of. So talk to us just in general, please, in general terms about Hungary and this part of Hungary where these amazing wines originate. Please.
Well, the odd thing about Hungary, to start with, is that the language, the Hungarian language, is nothing in common with our neighbors, because we have Slavish neighbors, Latin neighbors as Romania, Germanic neighbors like Austria. So nothing in common. We are close to the Finnish language, actually, Estonian language, so the North Uralic language family. So, and Hungarian tribes came down from there in the 7th, 8th century. They came down to Kovacs, and they stood there for 150 years, and they reached the Pannonian fields in 800 something, at the end of 800s, and they established here a big country, actually, which fought against the Germanic tribes that time, many times actually, and they have succeeded that time. So, and they took Christianity in 1000 by their king Saint Stephen. Actually, he was the first Christian king of Hungarians, and I think that was the wisest thing he done, to be an early Christian here. And then Hungary was quite a big country during the history. Sometimes in the 1300s, 400s, he even reached 3 different seas: the Baltic Sea, the Black Sea, and the Adriatic Sea as well, by different so they were adding Poland by having the King of Hungary a Polish wife. They added part of Romania and actually Croatia to Hungary as well. So well, but being here at the confluence of a lot of people, a lot of nations, it always make lives very, very hard. So, and because Hungary was a losing country in the First and the Second World War as well, we remain a tiny, small country actually after all those wars. But we are still here. We are a very proud people. So Hungarian thinks that they are a very proud nation here in middle of Europe. So yeah, in brief, this is our small history here. And to come back to Tokaj, where it's so special, I think it is special because of the climate, and it is special because people recognized that this very long autumn could create something very special in the vineyard. And it is special because when the Tokaj sweet wine was produced firstly, sometimes in the 1500s, I would say, the sweetness was the most important taste, because sugar cane wasn't produced that time. And to have a sweet thing was very precious, very expensive thing. So I think the fame of Tokaj came from that date because of this fact. And then obviously with the balance, with the richness, with the characteristic acidity of the Tokaj sweet wines, we get a very nice balance in our wines. We have a very good grape variety called Furmint, which gives a lot of acidity, minerality to the final blends, and being a late ripening grape variety with a thick skin actually allows both varieties to work the whole berry and not damaging actually the crop, and helps us also the long autumn with very good and nice daytime with sunny weather, which helps the drying, the desiccation of the berries. In the same time, we have moisty, foggy mornings when botrytis could develop on the berries. So these two factors, botrytis and shriveling, contributes to the final berry, the final crop, which is called also aszú berry, so aszú quality, which is then manufactured in a very classic way, in a very separate way. Nowhere else in the world you can find out this style, this harvest, and this process of the berries. So that's why I think Tokaj is one amongst the other 5 or 6 wines in the world who could be called as a classic, a world classic wine.
You mentioned the 2 world wars. War is an important theme in winemaking in Europe. There's a great Netflix documentary called Wine and War about Chateau Moussard in Lebanon. It's a terrific documentary. And there's another book called Wine and War, about mostly Bordeaux during World War II. And that kind of leads in another direction. But Hungary, just kind of doing some research for this conversation this morning, winemaking in Hungary might have been more affected, or at least as affected, by the 2 world wars as anywhere, right?
Yes, actually. So the First World War affected the winemaking of Hungary because Hungary lost Transylvania, actually, where they also had huge plantation and a huge winemaking history as well. And the Second World War hit Hungary because the communists installed here in Hungary, and they forget about quality. They just wanted quantity. So you can figure it out. The big Soviets, without any culture of wine, they had only the culture of vodka and alcohol. So they just needed, so they saw in the wine a source of alcohol, nothing else. And they just wanted, I don't know, rails of wine without thinking about quality. And because the wine region was the closest wine region to their border, so it was one of the most affected by this view to produce a lot, and don't care about quality.
We had a conversation last week with the winemaker from Huya in New Zealand, and she talked about the effect that the focus on quantity as opposed to quality had on New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. And if you're one of the handful of New Zealand wineries that tries to make really excellent wine, the average New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc drinker doesn't like your wine because it doesn't taste like what Kim Crawford tastes like now.
Yeah.
I have to say that I should have warned people when I suggested that people pour themselves a glass of the oddity. I should have warned them that they should be sitting down when they taste it. It is, wow, it is an intense wine. I mean, it is not shy.
No, obviously, and he needs time actually. Furmint always needs a bit more time in bottle to show his face. We have the acidity, we have the minerality, and with a bit of time, he develops very nice bottle maturation notes as well, which contributes to the final look of the Furmint. The Furmint grape, the Furmint young wine, it's not a very obvious wine in nose, so it's not a very perfumed wine like Sauvignon Blanc or others. So you need to taste the Furmint, you need to appreciate Furmint, to have some sips and to taste it and to try to understand Furmint. But I think finally, when you really got it, I think you will be satisfied about this grape variety in the wine.
Well, the bottle I'm tasting is 2016, so it's 5+ years old. It has some age. It is certainly youthful, but you know, I love it when I taste a wine that doesn't taste like anything else I've ever tasted. That's the most fun thing ever. And this wine does not taste like anything I've ever tasted before.
Hence the name, the oddity. It's supposed to to capture that. I mean, it's an oddity because it's a dry wine from a sweet wine region, but also because it is something unique. You know this yourself, that when you're talking to customers or people buying wine, you're always trying to make analogies. You're always trying to say it's a little bit like this, it's a little bit like that. I hope that over time we'll be able to say, no, this is Furmint. I think, you know, Zoltan mentioned the minerality. Had you been to Tokaj a few million years ago, it would have been a very different place. You'd have had 200 volcanoes going off almost constantly and throwing out different minerals. And the names of the individual vineyards now are essentially the names of those particular volcanoes. And the difference is from hill to hill in the soil color, the soil mineral makeup is extraordinary. And that goes all the way through into the wine. But Furmint we believe, is one of those incredible noble grape varieties like Riesling that can make wines across the spectrum, that have the potential for greatness, and there is that acidity which comes through all the way, and the potential for ripeness. But as I'm sure you know, well, Tokaj was not famous for its dry wines, and our first mission really in 1990, when Hugh Johnson founded the company, was to almost bring back from the dead the great sweet wines that had been legendary in earlier times, but under communism had been forgotten. That was our first goal. But since probably early 2000s is when we've been working seriously on the potential for Furmint in dry wines. Here with a bit of age on the bottle, you know, we're not going to pretend to be experts in the aging characteristics of the dry wines, and we're like any great winemaker, I hope you're always learning. But we understand more. And I think one of the biggest challenges perhaps has been making dry wines, which, because they're unknown, because they don't have a grand French name on them, sell at a certain price point. And I think Furmint often delivers what you would expect at twice the price or 3 times the price. I stood next to a lady from Chablis at a tasting in Pebble Beach actually a few years ago, and I remember her saying to me, "Charlie, put my name on this bottle, we sell it for 3 times the price." And I invest, apparently it's illegal, you can't put Chablis on a Hungarian dry Furmint, but she was very complimentary. But no, we can't say it's like Chablis, we can't say it's like anything else, because it is Furmint.
Well, I was thinking, I think a lot about if you poured me this blind, what would I think it was? And in a blind, if somebody poured this for me in a blind tasting, or any of us, well, not the 2 of you, but any of the 3 of us on the screen, the 2 women and me, in a blind tasting, if they poured us this wine, we would know they didn't like us very much, because this would be an impossible, wine. I mean, there are some wines that are so esoteric that how would you end up there? But, I mean, if it's a Gewürztraminer, that the examiner likes you because you can't mistake Gewürztraminer, right?
Yeah.
But I was thinking, what if I was presented this in a blind tasting, where would my mind go? Because it wouldn't, ferment would be in the I guess in the top 200 grapes that I would think it might be, but it wouldn't be in the top 10. And what I was thinking was, it's because it's interesting that you mentioned Riesling, because I thought I might identify it as a Sertial Madeira, which of course is Riesling grown on Madeira, because it has that weight and seriousness and minerality and acidity that dry Madeira has. I would know I was wrong. It would just be the best guess I could come up with.
Yeah, I think that the acidity is always, it's the starting point, I think, for all of our wines, and it's especially important in the sweet wines. I think that's one of the clues. There are often some herbal notes, often pick up a lot of sage, but the weight is different, and actually it's a challenge in the region point, because there are a lot of exciting things happening. A lot of the younger winemakers who simply cannot afford the time or the money to make the sweet wines are focusing almost exclusively on the dry. And there's a tasting in Budapest every February, imaginatively named Ferment February, where you can taste 100, 150 dry wines from the ferment grape. And it is actually quite hard even there to identify a common theme, because people are going in all sorts of different directions. I think for us, we're going for purity as much as possible. We want a very clear focus to the wine. We want that freshness. The development with aging is, as I said, something we're learning. I mean, here we're working with half barrel, half stainless. When we first started out with this wine, it was 100% barrel. But ferment, as Zoltan said, it's not a big aromatic grape variety. We still work with Hungarian oak a lot more for our single vineyard ferment wines. But freshness is the secret here. And again, as Zoltan said, Hungary used to have 3 coasts on 3 different seas, and now doesn't have any. But this wine always makes me think about the sea. Sometimes that sort of funkiness you get of sort of seaweed on the shore. I love it. I love it with oysters. I really do. It does the job of everything else you might put with oysters all in one glass.
Well, I would say it would be a great match for really, really briny oysters.
Yeah.
Wellfleets or something like that are, because one of the one common theme that's come up in these conversations is salinity in wine, and that is not a word you really hear all that often, but somehow in the last year, in talking to great winemakers around the world, I'd say 2/3 of them mention this word salinity, and certainly the salinity in this ferment is pronounced, and yeah, with really, really briny. I think you're spot on with a really briny oyster. Wow, it would be
sort of low alcohol dirty martini.
Yeah,
we'll put that on the next label.
You're right. I mean, you could probably serve it really cold with a little olive juice in it and tell people it was a martini, and they'd go, "Wow, this is great." Charlie, does ferment have a synonym anywhere else in the world, or is there ferment anywhere else in the world?
It's quite interesting. I mean, obviously, Hungary's been divided a bit, so just into the border in Slovakia. I'll say this because it's a bit painful for Hungarians, but Tokaj is one of the few wine regions that actually crosses a national border. So there is a small amount of historic Tokaj in Slovakia. So you have plantings there. There are small plantings in Austria. Randall Graham, actually, in the US, has planted some ferment now, following in the footsteps of Thomas Jefferson, who also planted ferment. And Randall's actually, he's creating 2 canals as well, which I've advised him to call the Bodrog and the Tisa, after the 2 rivers of Tokaj, to try and generate some morning mists in the hope of getting some noble rot going in his vineyards. So you do see it in other places.
Is he doing that in California, or?
Yeah.
He's not making Chenin Blanc anymore.
Oh, he's making about well, he's creating new grape varieties.
Right.
I actually bought the rights in a crowdfunding to name one of them. If you've got any good ideas for a grape variety name, then please let me know. But yeah, but he's really excited about ferment. Our viticulturalist has been backwards and forwards with him a little bit, because he's finding it a bit of a pain to grow in terms of yeah, looking after it can be quite challenging. But yeah, you don't see it a lot, though. I mean, Hungary is the home of ferment, and yeah.
I had a tasting with Randall at my restaurant in Nashville, probably 30 years ago, of his wines, and I had him dress up as the Lone Ranger, and he rode into the restaurant on a horse.
Oh.
And poured Cigar Volant from a double magnum from the back of the horse for my customers.
I'm sure he didn't need much persuading. What an incredible evening.
He was fully on board with riding a horse into this pretty nice restaurant. And fortunately, the horse, if you know what I mean, behaved pretty well.
You should, honestly, I mean, he is very passionate about the potential of ferment, as obviously are we, but it's nice to see other people catching the bug.
Zoltan, would you talk a little bit about the vinification of this ferment? I mean,
yes. Actually, the oddity for us, it's a wine region wine. I could characterize it, because we do have some. We produce grapes on our own land, 86 hectares. We do have some integrated small grape producer as well, from spread all over the wine region. So we buy from them grapes for this wine as well. So it's a really wine region wine, we can call it, from the southern part and northern part as well. And the first dry wine produced by Royal Tokaji was in 2003, just after 13 years of production, actually. And from the beginning, we thought, and the company thought, that we need to do something fresh and also with a good basement. So I think the previous team touched really the point by sharing. So part of the blends are vinified in stainless steel, and half part of the blends are vinified in barrel, actually. So what we do today, we start after pressing, we start fermentation in the barrels for half of the lots, and we undergo a maturation on fine lees in the barrels as well for, let's say, 5-7 months. If needed, we stir the lees from time to time to enrich a bit the wine. And the other half of the lots will stay in tank after pressing, will ferment in tank, and will be kept in tank as well on fine lees, also by stirring the lees if needed. So at the end of this maturation period, we are blending together the two types, and we bottle actually the wine. And before release it, we like to keep it at least 6-7 months in the bottle. So and our in our view, this ferment should be somewhere around 12.5, 13 degrees in alcohol, not more, to be pleasant, easy to drink, pleasant on the mouth. We would like to show with this wine the freshness of the furmint, the fruitiness, the mineral aspect of the furmint, together with his structure and complexity as well. So it is the first wine on our furmint range, but because we would like to show this phase of the furmint with this wine. Obviously, we do have other furmints as well, which are matured in barrel. But for those, we have a totally different concept. We use totally different maturations, and so you can love those for those characteristics, and you can love this one because it's fresh. It got a lot of youngness, and it's pleasant. It's savorous.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get my head around blind tasting this wine, and I might identify it as Muscadet sur Lie.
Well, yes, Muscadet sur Lie, Chenin, they could have something in common with the furmint. Yes, you are.
But then I thought, I might think it was a Grand Cru Chablis. So I don't know.
we'll take that. They've done quite well for themselves. We'll take that as a compliment.
And then I was trying to think of a female winemaker in Chablis that would have put her. I can't think of any female winemakers in Chablis. I'm trying to guess who that winemaker was that wanted to put her name on your wine. I know you're not going to tell me. Oh, La Roche, was it on La Roche?
They were not going to do it. They said if they could do it. I know some things have happened in France over the years with interesting blends and relabeling, but certainly not there.
There's a lot of, supposedly, Lebanese red wine, Lebanese juice in Bordeaux.
Well, there was a railway built from the south of Italy to Bordeaux for pretty much that reason.
Right. Anyway, it's fantastic. I don't know what the hell it is, but it's fantastic. That would be my conclusion in a blind tasting is I don't know what the hell this is, but it sure is fantastic. So just mark me as wrong on this wine, but I want to take the bottle home with me after the blind tasting. Zoltan, how did you become? What was your path to being in charge of winemaking at Royal Tokaji? Royal Tokaji.
Yes, Royal Tokaji. Yeah. So I'm originally from Transylvania, from Dracula's land. So my background history from the family is also linked to the viticulture. My grandfather and my father as well. They were working as viticulturists. So, and from an early child, I was going with my father in the vineyards in Transylvania. It's a totally different wine region called Târnave. It's more about fresh wines, actually. But I think I got infected there with this feeling of liking the wine growing and the winemaking process. And then I started to do my studies in Bucharest, in Romania. After the first year, I got a scholarship in Budapest. So I finished my studies in Budapest as a viticulturist and enologist. Right after the university, I was offered a job here in the wine region. But before reach the job, they offered me a sort of training period in South Africa, actually. So I was in Stellenbosch for a half year, working at Berkelder for Distel. Now it's called a big company there. Well, there I was the guest of one of the pioneering winemakers of South Africa. Dr. Julius Laszlo, he was my hosting guy there. And after finishing this practicing trainee, I joined his company, founded in '97. So I joined the company, Julius Laszlo's company, in '98. I was working for him for 7 years in next to Mad in Tajo, where I live actually. Then from 2005, I started to work for Disnoke, AXA-owned company, here in the wine region as well, as winemaker and later on as a production manager. And from the 1st of January 2017, I joined the Royal Tokaji team. Thanks, Charlie.
Best decision we've ever made.
As winery director. So my job is to take care about the technical details here, viticulture, winemaking, administration, everything which belongs to MAD, to this place actually.
Did you make the winery that you interned with in South Africa, did they make sweet wine?
Yes, they did a late harvest from Chenin Blanc. Very often we tasted, but well, in Stellenbosch they made Chenin Blanc dry and a lot of other international grape varieties, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, and the reds, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinotage, and other Merlot. So yeah.
Do you like Pinotage?
Well, I tasted many times when I was there, and I also visited the farm where they made the first crosses of Pinotage. I could be Jakobsdal, I think. I do not remember now the name. It was next to the sea. They had a lot of bush wines there.
Is that a yes or a no?
I don't, you know.
It's very different. It's something different. It's not as bold and as strong as the Sauvignon and the Cabernet Franc, but it's their proud, South African proud.
I bet I've tasted 100 Pinotages, and I've never tasted one that I thought I should buy in. They just leave me. I don't know. It's just not my thing. But a lot of people really, I think people like them because they like telling you that they know what it is.
Yes, of course.
But you know, I mean, if you think there are places in the world that are renowned for sweet white wines, Cyprus is one, South Africa's one, obviously Germany, Alsace, Bordeaux, and Hungary. I mean, those are am I leaving anything out? I guess, well, Australia, you know, some wines in Australia.
Yeah, there's a huge number of parallels in the story of Tokaj and Vin de Constance. I mean, we've been around for about the same time. Fell out of favor. Both loved by the same kings, and both with incredible aging potential. But it's a very different wine. It's a wonderful wine, but it's completely the opposite. I mean, they are going through the vineyards, throwing away the grapes which we would love to keep. It's extraordinary. Maybe if we could do some sort of exchange deal, we could probably come up with something extraordinary. But yeah, and it's wonderful to stand alongside them and the producers from Zoltan. I did a wonderful event at the New York Wine Experience with Pierre Lerton from Iquem, Bruno from Vin de Constance, and we had Christian Seeley so they were showing Quinta de Noval as well. And it was wonderful to be in that company, and it was a fascinating conversation. I think we, and everyone else, the other guys agreed with me. I think we amazed the God knows how many thousand people were in that ballroom more because we were less well known. Everyone knows Iquem is going to be amazing. Everyone knows Noval's going to be amazing. But I think we're now more of a surprise. At the beginning of the 20th century, you know, when Tokaj aszú was the most expensive wine in the world, it would not have been a surprise. But we're gradually building our way back up to be fit to stand alongside those other great producers.
I was one of the sommeliers at that event.
Ah, I was one of the most nervous men in the world at that event because, well, the worst thing, because Marvin came up and did an impromptu 40-minute speech before we were supposed to go on. So it didn't help. You know, my normal 3 pints of Guinness before doing a talk, I think became 5 before I had to stand up there. So it was, yeah, it was daunting. Most Riedel glasses ever used in the world, I think.
I think there were 3,000 people.
3,000.
Yeah.
Good.
We had to, you know, we had to taste a lot of wine to make sure no corked wine went out to the ballroom. And, you know, you got assigned, each sommelier got assigned a wine and you had to taste, I don't know, gosh, I guess it was, I don't know, however many bottles there were, you had to taste in a row. And if you were the guy, you know, if you can imagine, if you were the guy assigned to taste young vintage port and you had to taste 20 cases.
That's punishing.
Well, not 20 cases, but, you know, a lot. 10 cases. You know, by the 120th bottle, you were hallucinating. You know, you know, your tongue.
I don't know how Zoltan and the team do it, but when we're tasting Essentia, so free run juice after the harvest, you're going up to sort of mid 800 grams per liter of sugar, and there are 50 plus Essenzias in front of you. I have to sign myself off sick after about 3, but the team work through them. But you know, once you've had a bit of sugar inside you start getting very strange feelings in your head, certainly.
One year there was as part of that, the New York wine experience, there was a port tasting with Alistair Roberson and, you know, I think Christian Seeley, but I got assigned, I don't know, young Taylor Fort to taste every bottle before. And, you know, it's brutal. Honestly, it's just a brutal thing to do because the tannin in those wines, just the fillings are coming out of your teeth, your tongue swelling up, your eyes are watering, hair's curling. You know, it's,
I think great sweet wines are pretty much the only ones you could enjoy from when they're born for, you know, 100 years plus afterwards.
So let's talk about the late harvest.
So the late harvest, it's also one of our core wines. So I can say it's the first sweet wine in the range, actually. Even it starts at 100 grams or around 100 grams of residual sugar. And this richness, you can't avoid botrytis. So, and I'm saying this because it has a lot of botrytis taste, and it is a good introduction for the next step for the aszú wines. For us, the late harvest is a blend of the 3 main grape variety. We keep Furmint always in focus because from the final blend, Furmint has at least 50%. Furmint gives the structure. Furmint is like the Christmas tree who holds everything, then all the interesting things. Because his structure, his acidity, his backbone, everything. And then in the final blend, we also have at least 10% of yellow muscat, Sárga Muskotáj, which is the muscat grape grown here in the wine region, which is similar to the Muscat Petit Grain produced in south of France. And then the remaining 30–35% is Harsh-Levelű. So Harsh-Levelű, with his elegancy, bind together the aromatic side of the muscat and the the structured Furmin. So the final blend, it has good backbone, but it has elegancy, and it has a very pleasant aromatic side in the nose as well. Furmint and harsh level, after being fermented in tank, it will fulfill 5-6 months in barrels to give a bit of roundness to these two wines. Muscat will stay in tanks to preserve his aromatic profile. And after blending and bottling the wine, also we like to keep it for a while before we sell it. The wine, I think it has a very pleasant nose. When you taste it, you get an erupting mouthfeel of not only sweetness, but also very nice balance from the acidity. So you don't feel it at all sweety or sucrosy. It's just balanced, and you have the joy to taste it actually.
Is there, I've never heard of any, but are there great cheeses in Hungary?
No.
Thank you.
Hungary is not a big cheese producing country, so it doesn't have a big cheese history. It has a big culture of milking cows. So we have big cattle here in the Great Hungarian Plain, but Hungarian are milk drinking people, not like French people. So we like fresh milk and we like fresh cheeses. So fresh cheeses, yes, they were quite Hungarian. They produce mainly fresh cheeses, not mature cheeses. Well, today, you know, there are a lot of small manufacturers. They try to do something in Hungary, but their whole production looks to the French or Italian or other cheeses. So no.
I think I can guess behind your question. I mean, this wine, if I have to try and remember it in my head, I think membrillo. I think quince paste from Spain, and serving it with particularly sort of harder cheeses with a bit of maturity. It does that job. It's a quince paste wine.
Yeah. Well, I often say the best wine in the world for a lot of cheeses is really excellent Vouvray. Like demi-sec Vouvray is so great with Epoisse or Taleggio or Robuchon or Livro, these strong French cheeses or Italian cheeses. And when I tasted this, my mind kind of went in the same direction, that maybe an aged Gouda with some quince paste would be really, really great with this wine. I was also thinking of a really ripe peach grilled and stuffed with mascarpone would be really great with this wine.
Some of the most memorable pairings I've had with this wine, certainly on the cheese side as well. Mahama air-dried tuna is a fantastic thing, but some of the most memorable ones have been in China, actually, in Chengdu, in the Sichuan province, where you have that incredible aromatic heat in the dishes, and the late harvest there is just, it shines. It really does.
I bet. Yeah. Maybe that's what I'll have for dinner tonight. I'll make myself a Szechuan stir fry.
Well, if you've got some Szechuan lying around, but a lot of Thai dishes as well, where you've got the heat and the aromatics, it works beautifully.
When Zoltan, I have a funny story. I think you'll find this amusing. When I first retired about 8 years ago, before I realized I didn't want to be retired anymore, I spent a little while as an Uber driver. And one year on Halloween, I picked up a guy named Vlad from Transylvania. And his his fiance in Nashville. On Halloween, Vlad from Transylvania, they were going to a jewelry store to buy wedding rings, back to the airport to get on the plane, fly to Los Angeles, rent a car, and drive to Las Vegas to be married by an Elvis Presley impersonator. I'm not creative enough to make that story up. It is a true story. On Halloween, it was on Halloween, I picked up Vlad from Dracula and Dracula's bride from Transylvania and took them to a jewelry store and back to the airport so they could fly to Los Angeles, drive to Las Vegas, and be married by Elvis Presley.
Do you know the link between Tokaj and Dracula? It's in the book. So Bram Stoker, the book, I won't do the whole thing, but
Charlie, I need to pause this for just a second.
yeah, sure. Okay, tomorrow, I think.
Oh, we're back.
Please accept my apology. We have a pretty big business here, but it's also kind of a one-man show. So sometimes things are unavoidable.
No
but Charlie, you were talking about the connection between Dracula and.
Oh yes, so the book Dracula, it's fantastic. It sort of starts where a legal clerk, Jonathan Harker, is traveling over to this new client. And he travels through the woods and hears wolves and sees will-o'-the-wisps in the woods, and it's a terrifying journey, and eventually arrives at the castle to be greeted by the count, who offers him a simple supper of some cheese, some cold roast chicken, and some old Tokaj. So it's Dracula's house wine, obviously. Some of the later films adapted it slightly. I think in one of the films, Jonathan asks the Count if, as he's eating by himself and drinking by himself, he said, "Do you not drink? Do you not drink?" And the Count says, "I do not drink wine." And that was, yes. So Zoltan's homeland, Transylvania, and I think Tokaj found its way into all sorts of these things because it was genuinely pretty much the most famous wine in the world at the time of all these things. So, you know, many famous authors included it, many famous composers enjoyed it. And it found its way, I mean, Zoltan mentioned earlier about how proud a nation Hungary is, and they're tremendously proud of Tokaj. To my knowledge, and I've yet to be disproven, it's the only wine mentioned by name in its country's national anthem. A loose translation would be in the fields of Tokaj you dripped sweet nectar. So as Hungarians stand up and sing their national anthem, they talk about wine.
Charlie, did you have to learn to speak Hungarian when you took this job? Well,
between me and you, I've picked up quite a lot, but I try and keep it secret so that I can my team, and you've seen from Zoltan, who speaks perfect English, perfect Romanian, perfect French. So the team are wonderful and very, very patient with me. But I do have a sort of a secret working knowledge, particularly of wine Hungarian. And the language itself, although there's very few reference points, like Italian, it is purely phonetic. So if you can learn what the letters should sound like, you can at least sound as though you speak Hungarian. But my Hungarian certainly picks up after a few glasses of Tokaj at a ruined pub in Budapest at 3 a.m. I feel I'm pretty fluent by then.
Yeah, I speak a lot better French when I'm in a cafe in Paris and have had 3 glasses of wine.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was suggested that I get myself a Hungarian girlfriend, and that would definitely improve my skills. But my wife has vetoed that idea. So
a Hungarian girlfriend who doesn't speak English, so you would be forced.
No longer an option, Hoyt. Anyway.
Yeah. So doing research for this conversation, I spent quite a bit of time kind of reading things on your website, and one thing that really struck me is, and I want to be careful how I phrase this because I don't want it to be misinterpreted, but Jewish people are an enormous part of the story of wine in the world, right? Most of the Bordeaux chateaus you know, are owned by people of Jewish faith. And then again, that book, Wine and War, talking about how chateaus in Bordeaux hid Jews in the cellars to protect them from Nazis. But you know, when if you go on Laffitte's website or Latour's website, or you know, any Bordeaux website, or there's no mention of the importance of Jewish people in the wine industry. But on your website, it talks a lot about the importance of Jewish merchants in the growth of Tokaj. I think that's
yeah.
interesting. Could you talk, I guess, Zoltan, could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, so they were a very important part of the Tokaj, because in the past there were the gate in between Tokaj and the buyers in Poland and Russia. So actually they were the merchants of the Tokaj wine. So they knew very well all the producers from Tokaj, and they knew very well the quality they produce, and actually they sold accordingly, and they bought the wine and then they sold it to Poland and other parts of Eastern Europe. So really, that's why we are mentioning. And Tokaj had a huge Jewish population, actually. Not only wine merchants, but a lot of wine merchants. So yeah, that's why we are mentioning them. And when after the Second World War, the whole population was destroyed by the Nazis, Tokaj lost a very important segment of his fame, actually, who did the sales for the wine region.
Many of the oldest wines I've tasted from the region, I'm sure Zoltan as well, have different family names. There are 2 bottles of 1889 Essentia from the Zimmermann family of merchants who, as you'll see from our website, have a very close relationship with the buildings that we're now in, and 2 bottles are for auction next week, I think. I understand. I mean, none of us, I hope, well, none of us can imagine, and I hope none of us will ever have to imagine the horror of that time. And I can understand why people don't necessarily dwell on it, but it certainly has to be recognized. And when you visit, and I hope you will, you'll see the plaques that we placed on our buildings, and we invited members of the Zimmermann family to unveil those plaques to commemorate their role. And I think what has been wonderful now is just, you know, less than a mile away from us down the road is the synagogue, which has been refurbished at great expense and is now a sort of thriving place of pilgrimage. And it has, you know, it's impossible to restore or to repair what happened, but it is very important to commemorate it where we can.
And I think there is another approach as well. In this part of Europe, to be part of a nation or to be part of a group of people, it was very important, because it was a big mixture of nations: Hungarian, Slovenian, Slovakian, Romanian, and you know very well that at the end of the First World War, all these nations split it in different countries. So, and that was the willing of the big powers as well to divide Austria-Hungarian empire to not have a strong state in middle of Europe. So again, to be part of a nation in this part of Europe, it's a very important thing. And I think this is why we are highlighting that they were Jewish, we were Hungarian, they were Romanian, so on and so forth. So it's a bit this approach as well.
Is Budapest the most beautiful city in the world?
Well, for a Budapestian, yes.
I think even have you had the chance to visit? Have you been?
I haven't, but I know people who have, and everyone I know who's been there says it's the most beautiful place they've ever been.
It's astounding, and you know, as an outsider, I don't have to judge it with any Hungarian national pride, but it's an extraordinary place. And I think you actually notice, I think a lot of people recognize this whenever the Danube river cruise lines, whenever they do adverts, they always use photos of Budapest. They don't bother about the places on the way. But the situation with the hill and the castle on one side, the Danube in between, it's an extraordinary setting. It really is.
And there's the Hagia, right? The Sophia.
I think we may have strayed into Istanbul there.
Oh, that's Istanbul. Wow, that's, oh gosh. Well, I'm going to edit that part out.
Absolutely, that's the joy of pre-recording.
Sorry, man. Well, I was trying to be so smart, and that's always a mistake. Tokaj, is the word pronounced aszú?
Aszú.
Is it pronounced aszú?
Aszú, yes, aszú. It's also closed A, yes, aszú.
Aszú. And what does that refer to?
To the quality of the berry. So the shriveled and botrytized berry, we call it aszú berry, aszú quality berry. So aszú, it's a sort of word which comes from the Hungarian shriveled, aszalódott. Yeah, Charlie's showing you the aszú berry. So it's coming from the Hungarian word shriveled, aszú. And it means this botrytized and shriveled berry. And from the berry, this type of berry, we make an aszú wine.
Do you pick those shriveled berries one at a time, like some Trockenbeerenauslesers are picked, or do you pick the whole bunch?
No. So we do different generations. We leave the bunches on the vines, and we come up after several weeks to pick again and again and again. And if we are lucky enough, we can pass over a bunch 3 or 4 times during the harvest. So as the infection starts in some parts of the bunch, and you have berry ready to be picked, you need to go and to pick them, because then they will start to desiccate completely. So you need a bit of juice. So you need to go and select those berries and leave the others around, which are still too wet actually, to desiccate, and you can see the different qualities there. And then to come back and harvest them when they are ready again to be picked. And then, so we have a very long harvest. So we do not have an intense harvest, let's say in Bourgogne, when you need to pick everything in 2 or 3 days, because then will be the catastrophe. But the hard thing is in Tokaj is to be prepared always to pick the right quality, what you have on your vineyard. And you need to have big teams, because that quality could appear in different parts of the vineyard. So you need to pass and select the berries. And then you could have rains as well. So you also need to take care if you have ready to pick aszú berries, and next day will announce rain. So that day you need to pick everything which is good. If not, rain comes, you will have again too much wetness on the berries, so you need to leave them more days to desiccate or shrivel, and then you can harvest. And if you are lucky enough, you can still harvest middle of November, good quality aszú berries. But harvest starts around beginning of September and could last till mid-November. So, yeah.
So obviously the people that pick the grapes have to be extremely experienced or trained in which berries to pick and which berries to leave.
Yes, so actually those people who helps us with the picking, there are people from the neighboring villages actually. Actually, mostly they do not have a proper job. They are seasonal workers in the vines, but they come with a lot of joy for the harvest. And well, you can learn this skill as well. After 2 or 3 days of picking, you can get what you need to harvest, and you can see, you can have it in your fingers, you can feel it. So it's not the end of the world. You do not need a PhD degree to harvest aszú berries actually. But yes, you need to have a certain skill. That's for true.
Kimberly will remember, I'm sure, one of our most enjoyable activities when we bring guests over from other countries, including the US, is to do some, if we're lucky enough to be there during the harvest, is to do some picking. And it's great fun to go around with a sort of group of 10 American master sommeliers and give them a quick lesson on how to pick grapes and give them half an hour. Our guys were very happy if we're getting 6 or 7 kilos per person per day. And we send our guests through the vineyards for half an hour and see what they can gather. And it ends up being a very small amount. And then we proudly throw away most of that because it's not up to our standards. So it really does emphasize that there is no other way of doing it. And this doesn't happen every year. I mean, we are delighted if we have the conditions 6 years out of 10 to make our aszú wines. And when Monsieur Zoltan Vikem announces with great sadness that they're unable to make the 2012 vintage, it's hard to commiserate too much. Where they skipped probably 1 vintage in 20, we have to skip probably 4 vintages in 10. But when it happens, it's magical, and yeah, but there's a lot of work involved.
Well, I'm sure Kimberly picked just as many grapes, or she filled the container just as much as one of your experienced pickers did.
I think she was standing to the side with me, cracking the whip and occasionally firing a gun into the air to drive off the greedy starlings who are trying to steal our grapes.
Zoltan, there was a time in my life when I knew what puttonyos meant, but that time is long past because it's not knowledge I really have needed much lately. Could you explain this wine we're tasting, which is incredible, is 5 puttonyos. What does that mean?
So actually, puttonyos is the harvesting hod. Is the harvesting hod, the wooden harvesting hod traditionally, which is carried on the shoulders, and it was used in the past to take out the crop from the vineyard to the carriage actually, and it's still used in some parts of Hungary, and we can saw it elsewhere in the world, and it has roughly 27 liters, this harvesting hod. So in the past, when they couldn't measure the quantity of the berries, they used this tool to measure. It was a volumetric tool. So they took the traditional Gönci barrel, which is a 136 liter size barrel, So they measure the wine with this barrel. So if you add 5 harvesting hods of aszú berries to 1 Gunty barrel of wine, after maceration and re-fermentation and having done the wine, you will have a 5 putonyos wine at the end. And if you add 6 putony, 6 harvesting hods to the same amount of wine, you can figure it out. You will have a richer wine at the end of the.
Because the grapes would be more desiccated. So it took
well,
more.
Not only more desiccated, but you add more harvesting, more aszú berries to the same amount of wine.
Right.
I'm going to try and be clever here and just put a picture up. So
Yeah.
that is a putoin sitting next to a Guernsey barrel. So if you add 5 of those full of individually picked aszú berries to the wine from one of those barrels, you end up with a 5 putonyos. If you add 6 sugar lumps instead of 5 sugar lumps, you'll get a higher level of richness. But you'll see there, obviously, this is where the intensity comes from. You are extracting all of the flavors from 5 of those already incredibly concentrated hods of berries into one of those tiny barrels. So that's.
So you are not adding the aszú berries to the barrel. You are just measuring the wine by barrel in a bigger vat, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what is very important for Royal Tokaji and what gives us our style, that we use a fermenting mast to macerate the berries. Fermenting mast, and we do not need to break the berries, but we need to have very good quality berries, very good quality botrytis. We use a fermenting mast. We leave to work together, to macerate together for 1.5 to 2 days. And after that period of time, we will be able to press the berries, because without macerating them, you can't press the aszú berry. They are so shriveled, you can't get the richness stored inside the berry. So that's why we need something to macerate in the berries to get all the flavors stored inside the berry skin. So this is a very different way of getting the richness from the berries, and it allowed us to select the best so-called base wines and the best aszú berries to get the best result, the best aszú wine at the end.
Charlie, what was your path to becoming who you are at Royal Tokaji? You still there? Well,
sorry, I'd muted myself. Yeah, I mean, Zoltan was talking about, you know, his father and his grandfather working in the vines. My father, he fought in Italy during the Second World War and became massively passionate about wine and started a wine importing business. So I was very lucky. I grew up surrounded by wine. The first wine actually I remember tasting was 1971 Château d'Yquem when I was about 3 or 4 years old, which probably be frowned upon nowadays. But if you're going to give a toddler a wine, Yquem is probably a good place to start. And I was passionate about it. I worked for many years at LVMH with Champagne Krug in particular. And then in 2000, I'd met Hugh Johnson before, and the owner of Royal Tokaji is a English and Hungarian national, and he asked if I would like to come on board in 2011. And it's been a wonderful journey, because I really thought I knew quite a lot about Tokaj from the history and from my studies, but it's only since being sort of really embedded in it that I can understand it a little bit more. But I have an outsider's perspective in a way, as indeed Hugh did when he started the company. Hugh, as you know, with the World Atlas of Wine, he was many people's guide into the world of wine. And when he first visited Tokaj before the fall of communism, he'd always been aware of the wines, and he considered them amongst the world's original fine wines. They were some of the first wines to be traded internationally. There were great wines in Italy, but they didn't find their way to the court in France. But some wines from Germany, some wines from France, and Tokaj were the world's original fine wines. And his passion was really to bring that back. It was an unpolished jewel at that stage. And personally, for me, it's been wonderful to be involved in this stage of Royal Tokaj's journey. But I think the real joy is it's the timescales involved. Neil Martin, when he wrote about our 2007 Essentia, he said, "Drink now to the year 3000." So we are making wines today that, in his words, could be enjoyed in, I can't do the maths exactly, but let's call it 900 years time, a little bit more. So we, in our cellars now, and our cellars have been there since the 13th century, we're putting wines in there now that you could be drinking, not us, unless technology allows us to live forever, but our descendants will be able to drink these wines in 200, 300 years time. It's an extraordinary thing and an honor to be involved in.
I think that's 979 years.
Thank you. I was trying to think on my feet, and I didn't want to embarrass anyone with my speedy mental arithmetic.
Zoltan, if you had a bottle of this 5 Puttonyos open tonight and you were having guests over for dinner and you wanted to serve this wine, what food would you serve it with, or would you not serve it with food? Would you serve it?
Well, I think I rather go for with a Hungarian food, and I very often we make some pork knuckles, and then we just have a bit of aszú on the skin and some honey as well, and we put it in the oven. And we used to use some good spices like anise with this pork knuckle, and where it's enough crunchy, the skin, you take it out, you take slices, and the richness of the pork knuckle and the sweetness given by the honey and the also goes very well with this 5 Puttonyos, which also have a nice sweetness, but it has the acidity to reveal your taste and to enjoy again at 100% the meal what you have in front of you. So I tasted many times this way, and it works fantastically. And I'm highlighting main dishes because Tokaj, and I think all sweet wines are a bit struggling being pushed to the dessert and nothing else. I don't think this is a good way to treat them, because if you are just a bit open-minded, you will find a lot of way to pair sweet wines with a lot of main dishes, actually. So it's not only red wine and, I don't know, white wines you can have. Of course, they have their good place there, but I think we need to be a bit of pioneers of sweet wines and try to open the eyes of people that is not only about to buy like a present for, I don't know, for a birthday, or you can have an everyday wine, a sweet wine, and try to fit it in your meal choice somewhere.
Well, obviously, like Sauterne, it would be good with a terrine of foie gras.
Yeah, but foie gras is a very classic pairing with the aszú wines as well. And I can also mention, if we are going a bit higher for the 6 Puttonyos, the blue cheeses, which are just fantastic with Stilton-like blue cheese. The hard blue cheeses are excellent with aszú wines. But I also had Chinese meals, main meals, Sichuan and Cantonese meals with 5 and 6 plutonious aszú wines, which are just it's just perfect with these sweet wines. And yeah, so you need to find somehow to pair the sweetness, acidity of the wine with the spiciness, sour sweetness of the meals you choose.
I often serve a dish that I stole from a restaurant in New York City called Le Bernardin, which is one of the greatest, well, it might be the greatest restaurant in the world, but it's certainly one of the greatest restaurants in the world. I knew a guy that was the chef de cuisine there, so I got the recipe for this dish they used to serve called tropical fruit soup. And it was sliced mango and papaya and kiwi fruit and pomegranate seeds and, kind of tropical fruit sliced on a plate. And then I make a syrup with a simple syrup with lemongrass and ginger and star anise, and drizzled the fruit with that, and a scoop of mango sorbet and julienne basil as kind of a before dessert. And this wine, the next time I make that dish, I'm going to serve this wine with it because it would be absolutely magnificent.
I think so, yeah.
It would bring it. It's kind of like I was at Atelier Joel Robuchon one time, and they served me this muscadet with Bellone oysters, and it was so perfect. I couldn't tell if I was eating the oyster or drinking the wine because they were so well. So when I was eating the oyster, it felt like I was drinking the wine, and when I was drinking the wine, it felt like I was eating the oyster. I think this wine and that dish would be the same kind of experience. So I can't wait. Maybe, well, I might make it. No, I can't make it tonight, but I sometimes think. You talked about essentia. So tell the legend of essentia is that there's a goose quill in the bottom of the barrel, and whatever the weight of the grapes causes to, go through the goose quill out, the pressure of the grapes forces a little stream of juice to go through the goose quill, and that's what essentia is made from. I'm sure that legend was true at one time. I can't imagine that is still how essentia is made. So could you tell us how essentia is made now?
Yeah, so after harvesting the aszú berries, we store them. We obviously need to store them because very often the aszú berry processing is the last thing we make in the winery. So first of all, we do our dry and late harvest wines, and later on in November we start to do the aszú wines, and was so during the history always. So we need somehow to store these aszú berries. So we are using most of the wineries smaller vats to store the aszú berries, and we have actually a grid on the bottom of these vats, which allowed the liquid to go through and the berry to stay above. So you can imagine if you have in a vat about 500-600 kilograms of aszú berries, due to their gravity, they start to press each other. So and the liquid start to be released by the berries, and this liquid, which is naturally pressed by the weight of the aszú berry, is going through the grid, and then on the bottom of this vat we have a small tap from where we collect this essentia. So out of this container we could have let's say 10 liters of Essentia practically not.
It may be easier to do it with a bottle. I have one in my office. There we go. This is Essentia.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this bottle, what are we going to say? About 40 pounds of grapes to make this bottle. So this is a 37.5 cl bottle. Hugh, who describes it here as it's the wine world's rarest gem. Blah 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 blah. He also describes it as medieval Viagra. But he wouldn't let us write that in the box. So there's your little spoon from which you enjoy your Essentia. So it's the only wine we make that after collected, it's a spontaneous and very slow fermentation. So it ferments on the surface. It's so ripe that yeast really struggles to do its job. So essentially, the surface of the wine sucks in a little bit of moisture from the surrounding air and dilutes itself enough for fermentation to take place. So 2008 had 6 years or so fermenting, and we've got to about 4% alcohol there. I'm not going to open it now. I'm saving it for not that this isn't a special occasion, but it would make you all far too jealous if I did open it. So yeah, it's served by the spoonful because it's so viscous. It really would be very, very hard to lick the inside of a glass. So it's nice to have a spoon. When we bottle it, we lose quite a lot in the pipes, annoyingly, because of its viscosity. So that's the 2008 vintage. Not sure when the next vintage will be, really. And it's obviously, as Zoltan's explained, so many grapes per bottle, we can't make a lot. So here we have 2,906 375 ml bottles from the 2008 vintage, and it's only the 6th vintage we've ever released, starting in our first year, which was 1990. So it's if you see it anywhere, look out for it. And actually the year before last, we also released it for the first and only time in Magnum, after Zoltan had spent a lot of time getting permission from everyone from the head of the local authorities up to and including the Prime Minister. So there were 18 magnums of 2008 Essentia. I've probably got one here. There we go. So that is the Magnum. So it's a hand-blown crystal bottle. Everyone's slightly different, obviously, because they're not done in a mold. It's a gentleman in Pest County hand-blowing each one. 40,000.
We had one of these conversations with Ernie Lozen from the Mosel, and he told us that he had recently, or in the last few years, had discovered that his grandfather used to age Riesling grapes age the wine in foeders for 20 years before he bottled it. And he didn't realize, his father didn't know his grandfather did that. But he discovered this in reading his grandfather's books in the library. And so he just released I think an Erdner Pralat that was Auslese, which was aged for Auslese Trocken, that was aged for 20 years in foeders. And they have hand-blown bottles, and a famous German poet wrote a poem commemorating the wine. And I think he's selling those for like $3,000. They retail for like $3,000 or something like that. I don't know what your magnums of Essentia and hand-blown bottles are selling for.
40,000.
Well, there you go. I hope I can find somebody that wants to buy one. I was going to ask you, is it possible for an Essentia to age too long? But I think you've already answered that question. They have at least a 979-year lifespan.
That's what Neil Martin says. Actually, the 2008, he says, drink now between the year now and 2300. So it's a 700-year difference in the drinking window. He's yet to explain himself adequately on that one. But I mean, Zoltan, I mean, I've tasted back to the late 1700s. Hughes tasted back to, I believe, a little bit earlier than that. But yeah, they have potential to age, I think it's fair to say.
Bartholomew Broadbent is a good friend of mine. I'm going to ask him about what the oldest essentia he's ever tasted with his father is. I wonder what that is. That could be, who knows? That could be.
I know Michael. He's tasted back a long. I think the oldest one he had was with Hugh, actually. Huh. If you're speaking to Bartholomew, this will make no sense to anyone but me or him. Ask him about Carmen.
Carmen?
The opera Carmen.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I will.
He'll have a funny Tokaj story, which may not be appropriate for this forum.
He told us, this is off topic, but he told us this crazy story 3 weeks ago in one of these conversations. I said, Bartholomew, you were drinking first growth Bordeaux's at dinner when you were 10. When did you know when did your parents suspect that you had this incredible palate for wine that you have? And he said, it actually happened when I was 4. And I said, how? And he said, well, I loved orange juice. I drank so much orange juice and my parents wanted me to drink more water. And I told them I would drink more water if I could only drink from the tap in the kitchen sink, or no, in the tap from the upstairs bathroom and not the kitchen sink. And they thought that was crazy. So they had a blind water tasting for him, his sister, his mother, and his father, with wine from water, unidentified, from water from the sink upstairs and water from the sink in the kitchen. And he could tell them apart. His father could not tell them apart, but Bartholomew could. And they went up in the attic, and there were 2 cisterns, one for the sink upstairs and one for the sink downstairs. And the one for the sink upstairs didn't have a cover on it, and there were dead pigeons floating in it.
Oh.
And that was the water he preferred.
There are a lot of stories from
parents. That's how his parents realized that he had a great palate, was he could identify the dead pigeons in the water. It's, again, too crazy to not be true. Zoltan, what's the oldest essentia you've ever tasted?
Well, I had the chance to taste an essentia from 1917.
And it was probably, I guess, still young. Or...
It was still more than enjoyable.
Mm. And if this 5 Pittonios was a essentia, how would it taste different from the 5 Pittonios?
Oh, you mean if we taste an essentia from 2016? You mean?
Well, or just how is essentia different from, say, 6 Pittonios?
Okay, in general. So essentia is more concentrated. So you have more acidity, you have more sweetness in the essentia. When you get it in your glass, you can see the viscosity. You can see the legs of the crown when you stir it in the glass. You have a very rich nose of dried fruits. Very often you could associate it to somehow with the green tea notes as well. But it's very, very concentrated on the nose. And when you taste it, you can have that honey thickness on your tongue, and it's when you get it in your mouth, you just have an erupting volcano of different tastes coming, and you just cannot follow up which one came first, and we still you have it there till the end of your taste, actually. So it's something which is, you could imagine it only for the Essentia. So it's very rich, very viscous, very concentrated, but with good acidity, again, good acidity. And even at that richness, sugar content, you have a certain balance in the Essentia.
Well, I can't. I've only tasted Essentia one time in my life. I've got to make it happen to taste another one. So Charlie, I have a suggestion for your grape name.
Go on. I have my pen.
So you tell Randall,
Yeah.
Z for Zoltan, A for Allison, C for Charlie, K for Kimberly, Zach.
Zach. I'll have to check my Jancis wine grapes that there isn't actually a grape variety. There may be a Zach already. Definitely. It's taken me a while to choose, so thank you for that. But that works.
Yeah, there you go. So well, that would be fun. Anyway, thank you so much, Zoltan and Charlie and Allison and Kimberly. I've been so excited about this tasting. I was actually really, really nervous about it because I didn't want it to not be as fabulous as I thought it would be, because as you know, we've had a series of pretty extraordinary people join us for these conversations, and this one was one that I was especially excited about, and it turned out to be everything I hoped it would be. So I really appreciate Kimberly and Allison making it happen, and Zoltan and Charlie, I so much appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And when the world gets back to normal, we're going to come and see you at Sunfish, because it sounds like an amazing place. And it would be...
The world's back to normal here. Come on.
Yeah, we've still got some issues elsewhere. But
It's
yeah,
relatively back to normal here. So come on, we will have an event in this room with you.
Fantastic.
I promise.
Thank you. I really look forward to it. And thank you for your time.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
Hoyt.
Hoyt.
Have a good day.
Have a great
Have a
day,
good
guys.
day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.